Hello and welcome to It's Only a Sequel, a podcast about your favourite fearful follow-ups. And today with me, I have a very special guest. It's Mr. Scott Murphy from New Horror Express. How are you, Scott?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
It's a bit of a swapsies one, this, isn't it? Because we did one. I came and did one for you last year, I think now. Um, Although we've done one this year, I think as well. For
Yes,
which is what inspired this one, I guess, which was for Club Dread. Um,
yes, you did a follow up just recently where you appeared in another one of my episodes for the movie Cursed,
yeah,
an episode that just recently went out. But yes, what inspired me appearing on this episode for this particular movie was the Club Dread episode because there is some connective tissue
yeah, absolutely.
with this film.
Um, so today, for people who don't know, people who haven't read the title or looked at the title card, is I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, which is I don't even know where to start, really. But I certainly feel like this is uh, the reason that Club Dread evokes memories of this so much is because I almost feel like when the Broken Lizard decided they want to do a slasher film, they looked at this specific film and went, like, that's the worst of them. We've got to get that one, you know? Um,
Yes, because I do feel there's. It's very interesting because like I was watching this last night and I was like, oh, this. I feel like this really heavily inspired Club Dread, and
yeah,
it's interesting that this franchise, these movies have like so directly inspired parodies because like as much as people think of Scary Movie being a parody of Scream because of the way the killer is dressed up, like it's mainly a parody of I Know What You Did Last Summer. In fact, there's some scenes that are like beat for beat the same scene.
oh yeah,
Like you like if you watch like I Know What You Did, Scary Movie, and then directly after watch I Know What You Did Last Summer, you realize just how lazy the writing of Scary Movie actually is.
yeah. Well, like quite often, if we do a Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer marathon, um, we'll skip the first film from both franchises and watch Scary Movie, um, because it's basically the same movies but with jokes,
Yeah.
and it's you know, um, so I mean, uh, I've watched this film a bunch of times, and it turns out I still don't really remember what happens in it, which seems to be becoming like a common theme um, in movies that we cover together. Because I felt the same with Cursed, where I'd watched it, a few times, and I could not remember a thing about it each time. You know, um, and this again is
And you also forgot the killer in Club Dread.
I did, yeah. But I mean, in my defense with that one, it had been I hadn't seen that since it first came out.
That
Um,
is true. And
but
it is confusing who the killer is. Like they make it
yeah,
deliberately confusing as
um,
part of the joke.
but this I watched it like literally not last summer, but yeah, probably. When did they? It was October, around October when they did the TV show. I thought,
Right, yeah.
oh yeah, I'll brush up on my. I know what you did last summer's. Um, you know, so I sat through all of them, including the straight to video third movie. Um,
I've never done that one. I've never gone that far.
I mean, it's not awful, but it's just it has about a tenth of the budget, if and I'm being kind, you know. Um, but that does lead me on to my first real point about this. I think, I mean, outside of maybe like Halloween H20, um, this is like the biggest budget slasher movie of that era. It's like 24 million they had.
It is pretty massive. Yeah, 24 millions. Pretty hefty budget. I don't know
I could be
like
wrong, but I do feel like I looked this up last year,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
and it was round about. the most expensive slasher film of that era.
Period.
Definitely pre-2000s. I think maybe Scream 3 might have pushed it out of the way.
Okay, which would have come
But
out 2 years later.
yeah, I think this at the time was the most expensive of these kind of movies, and like that's evident the second the film opens. Because it like opens in like a church, but it doesn't look a like your standard horror film, does it? It's lavish, you know.
It is, and I think one of the things, I mean, one of the many deficits of the film is like it makes everything like super obvious, like
Yeah,
because it's got all this kind of in that opening scene, it's got all this kind of funny camera work, and like her voice is like super echoey, so you're like, oh, this is a dream. We're in a dream, right? Like it
yeah,
doesn't even. There's no like kind of transition point for there to be like you're assuming you're just watching her in a church and then like oh no the penny drops, oh no this is a dream, this is a turn, it's not a surprise, it's just like all right, right, okay, this is going to be some sort of funny cold open where it's a dream and like Ben
yeah.
Willis
Like
turns up, which is exactly what happens.
yeah. Well, I mean, this leads me kind of nicely onto what I usually do is try and kind of sum up the film first, and then I'll
Right.
go back into, you know, the moments that I think are worth talking about, and the various. But so if you haven't seen I Know What You Did Last Summer, it ends with what I think is a really good scare where they defeat the killer once and for all, as far as they're concerned. And then she's in the shower, isn't she? And she thinks it's all over. She's in the shower at her college dorm or whatever, and
Mm.
it all steams up, and someone's written "I still know" or something like that on the mirror, and
Yep.
then the killer bursts through, and that's the end of the film. And so as a horror movie kind of geek, in kind of the mid 90s, I was like, oh man, I can't wait for the sequel to this, like to see where that goes. So my disappointment when the film opens the way it does is just, and it never addresses any of that stuff.
No, it doesn't at all. I think yeah, that is one of the frustrations of the film, of like it just completely, I mean, um it's not unusual for films for slasher films to do this. Like both Halloween 4 and actually Halloween 5 and Friday the 13th Part 5 ignore the endings of Halloween 4
Yeah, they do.
and
Yeah,
Friday the 13th Part 4, which both basically both have the same ending, where like in Halloween 4 it looks like Daniel Harris's Jamie character is going to become the killer,
yeah.
and it looks like Tommy is going to become the killer in Friday the 13th Part 4, and then that is completely ignored. So I suppose it's not unusual for slasher films to ignore the ending of the previous film, but yeah, it's still disappointing.
Well, yeah, but it also makes the opening of this one so obvious that it's a dream.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because instantly you're in there and you're like, well, hang on, we saw what, and then I'm guessing its excuse is, oh, that the end of the last film was a dream as well, you know, because it does kind of lean into that quite early on that she's having all these dreams. Well, so the story is that if you, I'll sum up the first one in like a couple of lines if you haven't seen it, but I don't know why you'd be watching this or listening to this if you haven't seen it. But
It's a fair
so
point, one.
in the first film, three people with three names and Ryan Philippe knock over a man in the middle of the road. They throw his body in the river, and then he comes back for revenge and kills them all off one by one, except for Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt, who survive the massacre, and I'm guessing fall in love. Is kind of it's kind of their story, isn't it? Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ryan Philippe meet their makers at the hands of the fisherman, And then at the end of the film was the scene we described earlier, where she thinks it's all over, and then he jumps out of the shower or something and tries to get her. There's a good ending. I really liked it. The first film's, a class act. It, for especially for what it was. So this film picks up a year later, and it takes place on literally the longest 4th of July in the universe. But we'll get into that a bit later. And Jennifer Love Hewitt is plagued by dreams of of the murderous fisherman, and she's finding it difficult to even connect with her co-survivor boyfriend, or not really her boyfriend anymore. It's quite vague. Who is played by Freddie Prinze Jr. So then they win a trip to the Bahamas. Her friend wins a trip to the Bahamas through a radio call-in show, and her friend, her boyfriend, her and fourth wheel Will, who's like a friend who she definitely doesn't have any romantic intentions toward at college, even though it's all anyone talks about in regards to him, all go off on holiday to an island where it turns out it's storm season and no one wants to be there. And then the killer shows up and starts picking them off one by one, only to discover that there are actually two killers, one of which is her friend Will, and it turns out he is the son. He is Ben's son, and at the last minute, Ryan Phillippe, the other one, Freddie Prinze Jr., turns up, who's been taking part in a separate movie this whole time, turns up right at the end to save her, and then that is the end. Except for it's not, because there's a very similar scene to the first one in which she, her and Freddie Prinze Jr. are now shacked up together. And because he doesn't talk for like 2 minutes, she thinks there's something wrong. And then she gets a hold of herself, only to discover the fisherman is under her bed. And that is the last we ever see of Jennifer Love Hewitt's character in this franchise, because the third one is a brand new group of teens and not really connected in any way to those two films. And then there was a TV series, which again was not connected to any of it.
So the TV. I've not seen any of the TV series. So the TV series is not connected to the original cast in any.
No. So this is the first film. I know you did last summer. It's based on a book,
right.
And so by Lewis Duncan, I think, but I could be wrong. Let me just double check that. Lois, I mean, sorry. Yes. Very loosely based on her novel, I Know What You Did Last Summer. The TV show is, from my understanding, I haven't read the novel, much closer to the original book. And it's fairly good. I enjoyed it. It was one of those week-by-week shows that we got on Amazon, starting like mid-Halloween season. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. A lot of people were ready to hate it, but that made me want to give it more of a chance, okay. And it's nothing like the movie we know, the franchise as we know it. It's a very different thing, with the only kind of similarity being that something happens last summer and now they are reaping what they sowed the last summer. So, if you're into kind of horror TV shows that have a kind of bit of a, an indie drama edge, it's worth a watch. So yeah, but does that sum up the story? Basically, it's a bunch of teenagers.
That sums up the story, yeah.
It's Club Dread without the comedy. I guess, although they do try. Bless them.
Yes. Because there is a mixture of like intentional gags and like a lot of unintentional gags.
Yeah, my favorite one, I think, it's a little way into the film, but is the Will character really doesn't like flying, and Mackay Pfeiffer's character Tyrell is like, "Oh yeah, man, don't be a pussy ass bitch, you know. I'll whoop your ass if you carry on being a pussy." And then it cuts to like he's on a boat and he's like thrown up over the edge. He's like, "Oh, Tage, man, don't worry," like and it. I guess that's supposed to be funny.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess so. I think that's probably of the intentional gags. That's probably one of the funnier
yeah,
ones. Of like, yeah, because Will is like, yeah, it's not about it's just about like the equilibrium of the inner ear and stuff like that. It's not about masculinity. Don't take it that way,
yeah.
kind of dude. Yeah.
I think yeah, the film's overall problem is that it treats Will the way that it treats Will. Um, if that makes any sense. Like
hmm
he's a little bit too much Clark Kent for me, you know? Like I mean Christopher Reeve's Clark Kent, where he's like tripping over and like on purpose and stumbling around and like, oh sorry, I'm so clumsy and goofy, but really he's Superman. And it's a little bit, I don't know, it feels like cheating to me when a character is the killer, but they have a completely different personality until they become the killer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and
Like
it's
so much so that like it would be almost impossible to keep up the facade. Like
I yeah, I know what you mean by that. And it's a really kind of clunky reveal where
yeah,
where where Julie, because he is it seems like he's wounded. He's got this t-shirt that's covered in blood. It seems like he's been like stabbed or something.
yeah,
And then like Julie like pulls up his shirt and like really dumbly is like, I can't find the wound. I can't find the wound. Like she, if she just looks harder, she's going to find it eventually. So it takes her like a real long time to catch on. And then he goes, "That's because it's not my blood." And then he repeats the line in a deeper voice, because that's what happens in
yeah.
slasher movies
With an evil
sometimes.
face this time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and then wait, he drops his
yeah.
expression, and he drops the an octave of his voice, and then he goes, "Cause it's not my blood," and you're like, "All right, he's in on it."
But I mean, that's this film's overall main problem is that it's like a 10-year-old thought of the twists.
Yes.
And because uh I'll jump into the radio show stuff, and then we'll jump back a little bit. So they win a radio show. So these radio shows where you answer the phone, they call like a random number, and they answer and say, "All right, if you can answer this question, you get a free holiday or whatever." I guess it's a bigger thing in America, although they do have them here as well. You know, um, so they win a trip to the Bahamas by answering what is the capital of Brazil, and they think it's Rio de Janeiro, which like doesn't even sound like a wrong answer to me. um, but you know, obviously, I think that's why this twist doesn't quite work, because I think if it had been something a bit more obvious, I would have gone, "I'm sure that's not right." Do you know what I mean? But
So it was quite. Even the first time I watched this, and maybe this is me because like I I like football, so I have some minor geographical knowledge of
yeah,
South American countries. So even watching this for the first time, in like the first time I saw it, I like me and a group of friends like rented it like 1999 or whatever, and even then I was like, yeah, I don't think that's the capital Brazil. Like that's interesting. I don't know.
well, I mean, like, I just it wasn't so obvious that I'd second
Mm.
guessed it or anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
right, yeah.
um, so then the film later reveals that because they tell like the groundskeeper when they get there, oh, we won, and because the answer was Rio de Janeiro, is the capital of Brazil and all this. And he doesn't say anything. He goes, oh, cool. And then later on, he like shows up going, I knew you were all being tricked to come here because the capital is Brasilia. And I was like, so I can see what you tried to do there, but it's presented in the worst way possible. That, like, honestly, halfway through the film, I was like, oh yeah, like this is the only thing I really remember about this is that, like, the place they said on the answer they gave on the radio phone in was wrong, and that's how they know it's a trap.
Yeah, and I think the extra way that it's like super silly, the way they present that supposed twist, is like they've been running around, running away from the killer in the storm. They'd already survived a couple of things at this point. They've seen like a bunch of dead bodies. But, in classic horror movie style, the group splits up. And then, like, Julie, played by Jennifer Love Hewitt, and the other character, Carla, played by Brandy, like, they're both, like, in the hotel lobby. And then all of a sudden, for no reason, Julie is magically, like a magnet, attracted to this globe that is in the lobby, and then is just looking around the globe, and then finds with her finger that Brasilia is the capital of, like, just points to Brasilia on the map of Brazil, and then Bill Cobb's character pops up behind her and is like, yes, that's the capital of Brazil. And you're like, well, this is the clunkiest possible way you could have presented this information.
And it's like that's what I'm talking, like that's kind of like that feels like a 10-year-old wrote that twist. Do you know what I mean? Because the other one is when Will reveals that shortly after Will reveals that he's the killer, he then reveals that he's also the son of Ben Willis, who's the fisherman from the first movie. And he goes, didn't you realize Will Benson, Ben's son? And I was like, I thought, okay, there's a few problems there. Right, you've gone to a lot of effort to get them here in the first place. Why on earth would you give yourself a name that would give yourself away? Like, in the first place. And then, like, it's almost as if, like, he thought he'd been so clever that he didn't want her to miss out on that fact. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, by the way, in case you didn't get it, Benson is Ben's son. Like, it's also, as far as I'm aware, that's the first time they mention his second name in the film.
I can't actually remember. It's a weird thing. I just watched it last night. I can't actually remember if they mentioned his surname is Benson.
Well, if they did, I really didn't notice it.
I think it was like possibly. I think it possibly was mentioned really early on in the film, but like it's like a throwaway thing. It's not like he's name checked by his full name like a whole bunch of times.
Where they possibly could have mentioned his second name, like when they introduced him, or when she was talking about, oh, maybe you fancy that Will guy or whatever. And I was like, nah, I can't think of any moments where they said his second name. And if they did, even then, why would I make like a note of that? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So this is the thing, because it's presented, it's presented as this kind of riddle that you could have worked out, but like, why would you even think about that? Why would you even be like, take apart a character's surname, unless it,
maybe you've been reading.
Unless it's like super obvious of like, oh, that's quite funny. Like there's like in the third Harry Potter film, like the guy who becomes a werewolf is called Professor Lupus. Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, that it's like, oh, it's kind of embedded there. He's Lupus. Oh, of course he's a werewolf. Like, but Ben's son, I mean, that's a leap.
Also, like, I mean, I know they say Ben Willis like a few times in the film, but really, honestly, like, you don't really remember the name of the killer as the name of the killer. You just remember him as the fisherman. So, like,
that's true.
So it doesn't really register that much, even when they say his name. Like you just kind of take that as like passing information, you know, like so it's yeah, I don't know. It's like when people say Billy Loomis, but you go, oh, you mean like Ghostface, you know, like um you think of Ghostface rather than the name of the killers in Scream, I suppose.
You
Um
Yeah, you do because like I mean Billy Loomis is kind of the only one that I remember. It's like oh yeah
Stu, oh man, what's his second name?
yeah is the his accomplice in the first one is Stu something. I
Uh,
can't remember his surname.
Mickey, the freaky Tarantino film student, is the only one I remember from the sequels.
Oh okay.
And because that's they refer to him as that in the trailer, and I watched that trailer probably about 200 times before the film came out. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Mrs.
And the Scream 2 it's like Billy's mum
Yeah,
is the accomplice and I can't even remember the name of the main guy, but like yeah.
it's Timothy the Elephant, but he's called Mickey.
Mhm.
Um, but that's all I remember.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the director in the third one, who turns out to be Sydney's brother or whatever. I'm sorry if anyone hasn't seen Scream, by the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've
but
just
again,
completely spoiled it. But
and in the fourth one, it's and in the
it's
newest
Emma
one,
Roberts.
I mean that
Um,
one was anyway. Actually, this brings
yeah,
me up to Scream really well because
yeah,
this
right.
follows like the Scream 2 formula almost to the letter. Um, where they basically go, okay, so she's this character who was they were high school sweethearts in the first one. Now they're in college. Okay, Scream 2 checklist number 1 check. Okay, she's kind of got a new boyfriend in Will Benson. What a strange second name. Tick. Um, so new boyfriend at a new college with her new ethnic minority best friend, because the first film, like very much like Scream, was white on white. So they've used the opportunity to kind of broaden the cast a little bit, which I always appreciate. But this feels purposeful, like it does in Scream 2, where um, the cast of the first film is very, very, very um, not diverse. So
Indeed.
so they overcompensate here a little. Um, I mean, it works in terms of the story, but it definitely feels like it's a conscious decision. Although I did read that they cast Brandy because they liked her in the audition, but I don't know how true that is. Um, because she was quite famous at the time.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. She's quite a big pop star at the time,
yeah.
late '90s. Yeah, yeah.
So, but that's the Scream checklist. Oh, and let's not forget a killer connected or related to the killer from the first movie. So that's the Scream 2 checklist. I think done. Um, and I think they've looked at Scream 2 and went, what does Scream 2 do? Let's do that.
They
But
have,
yeah,
but this is this is like they've gone like, oh, we'll take the Scream 2 template,
yeah,
but what can we do that's different than Scream 2? And it's like, oh, instead of like making it a mystery like Scream 2, and because like previously they've been kind of the Scream movies mysteries, and even to an extent you're kind of like, oh well, maybe the Ben Willis was never really dead. I mean, there's a hint of kind of supernatural, but you're kind of like, oh, maybe he just wasn't dead. Right, okay, we'll accept that. But this is like, if Scream 2 was like, the killers are Billy Loomis's mum and Billy Loomis again.
yeah, I guess so. Um, yeah, it's very much like yeah, it's taken its cues from it, but I guess it's. I mean, I'm struggling to remember the first one. I only watched it last year as well, the very end. but I was fairly certain that he was kind of definitively dead at the end of the first one.
Yes.
Which even today, when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, the fisherman died in the first one though, and it's from my memory his son, and he's one of the guys who comes along. And then I was like, okay, there's only one white guy, so it was him. Um, you know, so I'd forgotten there was two killers. So all the way through the film, every time he showed up with a beard, like I thought, like, are they just really testing like my observational skills to see if I'll notice that he has a beard all the way up until the reveal, or is it like supposed to be like a subconscious thing where people just see him as the fisherman, but when he reveals his identity, it will be the son. And I really couldn't remember how it played out. So it was a real surprise to me when it turned out the fisherman was in fact still alive.
Yeah, because he seemed like pretty definitively dead. Like, because
Yeah,
they dispatched with him like on the boat and that,
yeah,
and he's really fucked up.
yeah. So I was thinking, I thought to myself, like, because I thought it bordered on ludicrous that he was still alive at the end of the first one, but I thought, maybe like it's a spooky thing, or it's someone else, or or whatever. Like, um. So, well, we'll come back to all this in a minute. So my next point. So before they win the radio show, we come back to meet Freddie Prinze Jr. again after the events of the first one. He's come to surprise Jennifer Love Hewitt at college, and I've written here unreasonable Ray because, like, she doesn't want to go back to her hometown because she's still kind of haunted by nightmares of this whole thing, and the town where it happens obviously is a huge trigger for her. So she's like, I'm not ready to go back there. And he's like, well, I've got to work. You're trying to avoid me. Am I the problem? And she's like, no, like, not at all. It's just, that's where our friends were murdered and someone tried to kill us. So I don't feel massively comfortable about going there. He's like, well, fuck you then, bitch. And like, fucks off. And I was like, Jesus, man. Um, you know, um, so then they win this radio show, these 4 tickets to the Bahamas. And this is where things get a little bit like, hang on a second. So she rings Ray and says, hey man, do you want to come to the Bahamas? And he's like, oh, the Bahamas, eh? Oh, so you didn't want to come back to this shitty fishing village with me, but you'll go to the Bahamas, will you? Like, and she's like, what? Like, and then he hangs up the phone and goes, I just really love my girlfriend, I was going to propose to her and everything. And you're like, what? And his mate's like, yeah, well, you should. And he's like, okay, you're right. You know what? I should call her back and tell her I'm a dick. And you think, oh, good lad. Bit of sense. And his mate goes, no, 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 no. What we do is we don't take the free ticket to the Bahamas. We drive to the Bahamas and surprise her. And at that point, I kind of thought, this is, I'm not kidding, the worst plan I've ever heard in my life. Like, it's just, what? I mean, and then when you consider what happened, so it's at this point you start to get the feeling that Freddie Prinze Jr. really didn't want to do this. And so he was like, look, can I be there for like a couple of days? Is there a way you can make that happen? So I'm, so that I'm abiding by my contract, but like, I'm not there too much. Because they're on their way to the Bahamas, I guess, down the road when they see a car crashed with someone in a fisherman's outfit lying in the middle of the road. Now, out of the two of them, one of them's faced the fisherman before, which is Freddie Prinze Jr., and his friend hasn't. So which one of these men do you think gets out the car and goes to investigate, and which one of these do you think is overly cautious about that situation?
Well, of course, the obvious answer is our hero Ray is the one who marches out of the car and Dave, played in a cameo by John Hawkes, who I think is a great actor. I did not
Yeah,
remember him being in this movie, but yes, and he's still fun in the minimum screen time he gets. He's still fun. So
he is
shout out
good.
to John
Yeah,
Hawkes there. But yeah, so like Ray gets out the car, and then it's a dummy, and he's been tricked. And but again, this is one of the movie's downfalls, is like the way the movie like does like the blocking and stuff like that. It makes every kill like super obvious of like what's going to happen.
yeah.
Of being like just the way they frame the character of Dave, you're like, oh yeah, Dave's gonna get it. You know, like he's gonna
Like,
be killed
oh,
any
like
second now. And then like,
like
yeah, he's got a hook in his
shuffled
throat.
over to like the roadside of like the window on the roadside to give him like the killer enough space to drag him through a window. Like, it's just the whole thing is just like telegraphed from a mile away. Um, so then the killer tries to run Ray over, Freddie Prinze Jr., but he does a terrible job because basically he just does like a couple of forward rolls down a hill and then ends up in hospital.
I think that we should mention that like Ray manages for quite some distance. We're talking maybe a couple of 100 meters to outrun a car. I know he's doing the zigzag run, but
Yeah.
still he is outrunning a car.
Yeah, he is. And what's with trucks in movies not stopping for nothing? Like, so,
Oh,
like,
I've no idea.
I want you to imagine like you're a truck driver, yeah? You're driving
Mhm.
down the road, it's the middle of the night, and you see suddenly, oh my god, there's someone running towards me in the road, and someone's chasing them in a car. What the hell's going on? I better stop and see what's happening. Not, oh, I better drive at them. Hopefully they'll get out the way. Like, it's one of those things that, and they always honk their exact same horn on the way past. Like, and you're like, what is happening? What is with truck drivers in horror movies? Um, but yeah, so he falls down a hill, Jonah Hill, no, down a hill, and he ends up in hospital. And that's basically he gets kind of sidelined from the film. He does have a few more scenes, um, but they take part in a completely different film, really. Um,
Can I mention a couple of those scenes because
you
like
can,
they
you
really don't
can.
make sense to me.
Well, okay. Let's split into two movies and let's discuss the Ray timeline.
Okay, so in the Ray timeline, there's a couple of scenes that make no sense and like don't need to be in the movie. So the first scene is like he's really worried for Julie, so he tries to phone the hotel,
Yeah,
which is kind of like it's a scene that kind of makes sense in that like oh if like you could just have there's a specific reason why I don't think it makes sense. The scene works if you're just seeing Ray's side of like him phoning and him not getting anybody, and then like him putting the phone down and being like, "Shit, I'm not getting anybody. Let's bust out and let's go and just go there."
yeah,
That's fine. What doesn't make sense is you see the phone ringing in the hotel, and it does that thing that happens in horror movies where you have like this slow pan onto the phone. But that generally happens in horror movies when a character is reacting to it. Like, oh no, the killer's on the phone again. Like in Scream, like in the opening
yeah.
scene of Scream, and like in other movies where it's like, oh my god, wait a second, the killer's in the house. Ah, whatever. Is it, there's scenes like that, but like because it's just like a slow pan onto a phone doing that kind of suspense thing, but there's actually nothing happening at that time, and there's nobody at it just doesn't make any sense. So that scene doesn't make sense.
No. Also, and I mean, bear in mind that we have been privy to his entire conversation about this trip to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Did he call an international operator and go, "Operator, get me the Bahamas"? Okay, well, where? The hotel in the Bahamas. Are you you talking about one of the biggest holiday destinations in the world, and you want me to get you a any hotel? There's a lot, like, and so like it just
Yeah, because the hotel name is never mentioned
it's
to,
just like
so he
a
doesn't know the
hotel in the
hotel name.
Bahamas. So is there one hotel in the Bahamas? I mean, I don't think that's true. I don't know 100%. Maybe it's just one big hotel, but I'm fairly certain the Bahamas has several hotels minimum. Um,
Yes, I
several
feel
resorts.
like it's probably got quite a few hotels.
So, but Freddie Prinze Jr. is such a hero that he just goes, international operator, get me the Bahamas. And they go, right away, sir. Putting you
And
through now.
they just put him through. They just put him through. Um,
Uh,
so the other scene that doesn't make any sense, that is it literally just padding, is there is a scene where he's obviously going on a bus to get to somewhere, to get to the
oh,
place
yeah.
that to get the boat to the Bahamas. Like it's it also like it's not explained how far he sails, but anyway, we'll not get into that. So the scene on the bus, he's just on the bus. He's kind of recuperating. He's taking some painkillers because he's got a broken arm and stuff like that. His face is all busted up, and then we get this kind of again. We get this camera focusing on this old woman, giving him a weird look and being like, ugh, what's that guy up to? And then it just cuts to the next scene, and you're like, what? And
Yeah,
then
like,
it's not connected to anything else in the film. Like
this
the old
isn't,
woman doesn't
yeah,
appear as like Ben Willis's wife or something,
yeah.
like but
It
it's
feels
just
like
not
it's
connected
carrying
to anything.
over from the first film where for a while we think he's the killer. Like, so it's almost like the writers have forgotten that we've been through that. We established he's not the killer. So don't worry about that. And they've gone, but what if he was? What if he's still the killer? Like it feels like that kind of that moment
Yeah.
where it's casting doubt upon a character that we've already seen was nearly killed by the killer, but yet they haven't quite remembered that he's not a suspect anymore. We did that last movie. That's over now. Um,
Yeah.
there's then a bit where
Yeah.
he goes to buy a gun and he trades in the engagement ring to buy a
Mhm.
gun. Um, and I couldn't help but think, like, so, like, I know you got run off the road and stuff, but you're not like a fugitive or anything. Like, you still have like a bank account and stuff, pal. You know, and things like that. You're not on the run. You're not Harrison Ford. You just walked out of a hospital. That's all. Like you still have a bank account and all that stuff. Like so, just go to the ATM, withdraw your cash or whatever. Go in the overdraft if you have to. But that feels like a really drastic move um to to sell his engagement ring to buy. I mean, I'm guessing it's to show how important it is for him to save her life or whatever, but it seems strange.
Yes, I think that there's a lot of things in this that's supposed to either increase the emotion or
Yeah.
increase the suspense, but it's kind of done in a silly way that's just kind of if you actually think about it for more than a second,
Yeah.
you're like, this does not make any sense.
Yeah, like you can imagine that like in a more competent movie that would be a big moment, but because it's just completely disjointed from everything else, it just you know, um it feels weird. Like it feels like someone's trying to stuff some substance into it. I should also mention at this point that Mark Boone Jr. plays the pawn shop guy. Um, so he's I think his most famous film is probably Batman Begins. He plays like
Yeah,
one of the
I feel like he's probably. I think he's most people will most recognize him from that, or if they're fans of Sons of Anarchy.
Oh, see, I didn't know he was in that, but he's also in John Carpenter's Vampires as well. You see.
All right, so yeah, so he is, and he
Uh,
always plays like similar characters, like
yeah, very
shitty
much like
characters.
that character. You know, yeah, he's always a bit of a kind of scuzzy guy. You know, like um. So yeah, it was just interesting to a nice little cameo there. Which will lead me on to some bloody hell. Well, let's finish the Ray timeline first, and then we'll. So Ray goes and steals a boat. Um, although I'm glad he was sailing it because it looked like he was also going to get the guy to sail him there, and I was like, doesn't he work on a boat? And my wife was like, oh yeah. And I was like, so shouldn't he know how to sail? Like, you know, how to drive a boat? But then to the film's credit, there is a shot of him driving the boat in the storm across to the island. Um, and then and then we don't really see him until he shows up right at the end at the most convenient moment possible to shoot. He tries to shoot the. He'd say this is the problem with Ray's story is it doesn't really do anything. He turns up with a gun. He tries to shoot the killer, and the gun doesn't work.
Well, yeah, I think. I mean, he does do something. So like he like beats up Will, but then Will turns the table and beats up him,
Yeah,
and then Will kind of has like drags Ray up and has like Ray's kind of arms, you know, so he can't get out kind of thing, so that Ben can like finish him off. The fisherman can finish him off, but Ray then hits Will with a back fist, which leads the fisherman to kill his own son, which distracts the fisherman just long enough because he's so kind of like that Julie can shoot and kill
yeah,
Ben. So I guess he does do something.
yeah.
I mean,
But
he
I
kind
mean,
of fucks up his rescue, but like, he gets
yeah, but I mean, for all the effort he went to, you do feel like fuck, man, you're useless.
he did
Um,
fuck it. He did fuck it up, but I mean that was a useful backfist, I guess.
yeah. Also, and like a final fuck up from Freddie Prince, the Freddie fuck ups as we call him, um, is that he didn't check the windows in the last scene. Um, you know, he's too busy brushing his teeth, and he didn't make sure all the house was secure. So that's kind of down to him as well. Um,
Do you think, by the way, do you think that line is improvised? Like when he, like at the end, there's like a weird bit where he's like doing his teeth, and then he just admiringly looks at his toothbrush and goes, "God, I love this toothbrush."
yeah, like what the
Puts
fuck's
it
that
away,
about?
and I was like, "What the fuck?"
I just have no idea. Like, it's baffling. Um, I don't know. It's just well, so I mean, he's in the film for collectively probably about 7 or 8 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he really Freddie Prince Jr. is no offense to the guy, he seems like a good guy,
Yeah, yeah.
a slightly limited actor in the first place, but he seems really not to be caring in this. He is really phoning in his
Yeah,
performance
it feels
in
like
this
he
one.
didn't want to be there, and he said, "Look, can we make it so that I'm not there for very long? Will that work?" And they went, "Okay." Um, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned bad acting because I mean, I won't have a bad word said against the Fred Prince of Bel Air, but 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 Jennifer Love Hewitt, on the other hand, my goodness. And I remember noticing this the first time round that she just acts with her arms and none of the rest of herself. Like,
Oh, so like I did quite like the reprise of, because one of the funniest moments in the first I know what you did is
What are you waiting
when
for?
she does the "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" which is parodied in Scary Movie.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like the exact same scene. It's the same
yeah,
framing. It's the same everything. It's just like Anna Faris doing it instead of
yeah,
Jennifer Love. Yeah. So like I did quite like that they kind of reprised that. Yeah, she does like a lot of arm flailing.
yeah. And if
Again,
you
she's
watch Brandy as the film goes on, you know Brandy starts doing it as well because she's obviously. I mean, she wasn't really an actress so much when she'd done this. Um, so
I
it
guess
feels
she
like
was
she'd
still
been
mainly a
picking up
pop
acting
star. Yeah.
cues from Jennifer Love Hewitt throughout the film. So by like the last few scenes, Brandy's doing all the arm acting as well. And you're like, bloody hell, stop with the arm acting.
It's
Like,
infectious.
oh my god, it's. I mean, I remember thinking this in the first one. Every character feels so charismatic, except for Jennifer Love Hewitt, and it's the same here again. Like,
Well, I think like one of the things that is actually kind of an improvement on the first one, I think, is that like every slasher movie has to have like an asshole character who doesn't believe what's going on and kind of being like, "Pah, what are you talking about?" You
yeah,
know, like, and in the first one it's Ryan Felipe, in this one it's Mickey Pfeiffer,
yeah,
and Mickey Pfeiffer is like good at being the asshole, and like the running joke of him being like super horny all the time and like not getting any is actually quite entertaining. And his general demeanor kind of like makes sense of like he feels like a kind of character, a heightened character, but a kind of character that exists. Whereas on the other hand, Ryan Felipe's character in the first one is fucking insane. Like he'll just go like from 0 to 100 anger in some scenes, and you're like, where the fuck did
yeah.
that come from? And he just like shouts some of his lines, like he'll be saying a normal line and he'll just shout the next line, and you'd be like, what the hell? This guy is clearly a sociopath. Like this guy needs help. Like,
Yeah. Um, I quite like Mackay Pfeiffer in this.
yeah, I think he's
In
quite
some
fun in it.
ways, but he's so horribly written at the same time. Like
Oh no,
he's like
I mean, the writing in general is
he's
terrible.
like there's like a bit where they're like being chased by the killer, and he's like, "God damn it, I'm hungry and I'm fucking horny," and he looks at his girlfriend like accusingly, and you're like, "Okay, pal." There's like a time and a place, and then the the bar lady who they find, she's like, "What the hell's going on?" And he's like, "Listen, don't get us started on that. She'll talk about serial killers all day. What's the most important thing is this is fucking ruining my holiday." Like, and you're like, "What?" Like,
Yeah,
he's
so
just
that line, that kind of thing just before his death like really doesn't make sense, because like they're still kind of playing it as if like his last line is like, yeah, and it'd be like he's talking about a fucking psychopath. I've not even seen one psychopath yet. And then he dies. And it's like that's fine. That's a kind of line that's fine, like, a little while ago when, there's been no clear evidence to anybody other than Julie that there is a killer on the loose. But by this stage, he's seen a bunch of dead bodies. It is very clear that Julie's story is true by this stage. So the line he's saying there just makes no sense at
yeah,
all.
absolutely. All I mean, not to mention the fact that like the killer manages to just fucking sneak up on him, like without anyone seeing it, even though he's having a conversation with everybody. Like it's just baffling. But outside of the main cast, there are. I don't want to say good. Well, no, one of them's really good. There are,
I would say
but
a couple of them are quite fun. Can
there
I
are a
also?
couple. There are a
I just
couple of great cameos. I think.
There is a
Um,
couple of great cameos. Can I just say one last thing about the
yeah,
dialogue?
yeah.
Because there's some insane lines in this script, and I think there's one line in it that really sticks in my head, and it's really throwaway. But I was just like, what? Nobody has ever said that. Like, so this film was made in 1998. When they're flying over, like, Will has a panic attack about being scared to fly, and he's listing off all these reasons why he's scared to fly. And most of those reasons make sense, like the reasons that most people would say they're scared to fly. But one of the things he says is like, yeah, and now people can buy surface to air missiles on the internet. And I was like, really? People were like going through an AOL search engine and being able to buy surface to air missiles? Is that correct?
Like,
Is that what you're really telling me?
when Amazon didn't even exist at that point, did it?
No, I don't think so.
Exactly. Like, and it was fucking hard to buy anything off eBay back then. Like, oh.
Anyway, sorry.
No,
I felt like that line needed
Yeah.
to be mentioned.
Well, I mean, I'll get into Will in a bit, but he like that character's a whole problem on his own. So yeah, there are a couple of great cameos in this. So the first is Bill Cobbs from Demolition Man, and the Oz the Great and the Powerful, the stuff I know him from. Who plays Estes, who's like they refer to him as marginally. I'll get into that in a minute, but yeah, he's like the hotel porter. Jeffrey Combs as the hotel manager, and like this is I think probably one of the most interesting parts of the film, because what I don't understand is the second Jeffrey Combs showed up in this film, I was like, why didn't this stuff like this happen more in the 90s, like with stuff like Scream and like Valentine and this era of slasher movies? Why didn't we get more cameos like this from actors from kind of like the big classic franchises then, because Jeffrey Combs suddenly adds, like, it's weird, like a little bit of like class to it, like, and a little bit of like authenticity, like horror authenticity to it that the film kind of lacks otherwise.
Yeah, it's weird that like like you say, like particularly because a lot of these films kind of post Scream were so kind of meta and stuff that you didn't get more of the you almost got like more cameos like in the kind of next phase of horror, in the kind of like torture porn, particularly with like
Yeah.
Rob Zombie films and stuff like that, where it was like all horror cameos all the time, with like every character was like, they were in exploitation films in the 70s or whatever. So it is interesting that, and Jeffrey Combs, he does bring, I mean, I suppose gravitas is maybe a stretch to when talking about this film, but he does. Well, let's say gravitas. He does bring some gravitas to the movie, and like every scene he's in, he's great in.
Yeah.
Like I think when they first meet him, and because it feels authentic as well, because he doesn't want to be there. It's the off season, he's tired. He's obviously been the wholesale manager for a long time. So his kind of bored speech of like, the hotel opened in the 1920s. We've had several Hollywood luminaries stay here. Julie Garland stayed here once. This is clearly like a speech he said like 1,000 times, and he's fed up of saying it, and he particularly doesn't want to say it to these stupid kids who aren't even paying the big money. So fuck them.
Yeah.
So it really rings true, and I think his performance as his character, Mr. Brooks, is great in the couple of scenes he manages to get.
And it's only because he delivers this portion of the film that I feel like it's even slightly believable, because he suddenly just goes, "Oh yeah, it's storm season. 4th of July, like clockwork, it comes rolling in," and I was like, "Hang on a second, what? Why is this only being mentioned now? Like, there were literally people holidaying a minute ago, like when they came on the island, there was people with them, like there were people walking around in bikinis and stuff, and now suddenly like it's setting it up like, oh yeah, they're out here on their own on an island by themselves. And I was like, but we've just watched them walk through like a holiday resort. What? Like, it's just so weird. But because Jeffrey Combs delivers it, you're like, well, okay, I believe you, but um, it stops it being beyond ludicrous.
Yeah, I know what you mean because like when they come off the boat, it feels like a bustling resort, and
Mm.
then when they get to the hotel, it's like the
Which is a
resort
walk
is dead, and
from the dock.
yeah, when they get to the hotel, it's like the resort is dead,
Yeah.
and
And they start talking about it like it's a deserted place, like instantly
yeah.
and it feels like at that moment in the script they were like, oh yeah, it needs to be deserted now, doesn't it? So now it is. And that's how that
Because it does feel weird, like because when the first night they're there, when they go to the bar, and it's just like the two guys, and you're like, and they're like, oh, they're talking about how dead it is, and you're like, but yeah, what happened to all those people on the beach when you first came here? Like, are they in a different hotel, or was it that literally everybody's last day? Like, did they all go that afternoon?
because Jack Black was what, so that should get me on my next cameo as well. Jack Black shows up, in what I can only assume was the inspiration for the main character in, is it Lance in Lars
in Club Dread.
I can only assume he was the inspiration for that character. But he's like walking around like he's trying to sell them weed when they first get there. He's trying to sell everyone weed because there's loads of people there. And then he starts like trying to crack on with like another girl who's walking around in a bikini and stuff. So it does really genuinely feel like there's a lot of people there, and then suddenly they're like, no, there's no one here, and you go, oh, okay. I guess that's what the plot needed, so we'll just accept that. And then Jeffrey Combs mentions that they only have 5 marginally trained off-season staff on. So, but then Bill Cobbs, when they try to take their own bags in their room, goes, I've been doing this since you was a knee-high nipper or whatever. Like,
I think it was like before you were a twinkle in your dad's eye or something. So like,
and I'm like,
even
hang on,
before
so
he was
which is
born,
it?
kind of thing.
Is he marginally trained, or is this his career? Like, which one? Do you know what I mean? Like, what Jeffrey Combs is saying doesn't line up with the people that are there. I mean, except for possibly Jack Black, who I'm guessing is some kind of staff member.
Yeah. And he does say 5, right? He says 5 marginal, but we only meet like 4.
Where there's the dock hand as well. So hang on, there's Jack Black.
There's Jack Black. There's
the laundry lady.
Yeah, and then like the Derek, the dock guy.
And then the bartender.
So we got Bill Cobbs, Nancy the bartender, Jack Black, Derek the dock guy.
Yeah.
Who's the 5th?
Did we not just? I guess does Jeffrey Combs count him? No, the laundry lady.
Oh, the cleaning lady. Oh, okay, that's the 5th. Yeah. Okay.
I knew there was a 5th one. Yeah.
You're right.
But I mean, I thought for a second maybe Jeffrey Combs is counting himself.
But none of them seem, apart from Jack Black, none of them seem marginally trained. The dock guy seems like he's been there for a little while. He's playing like a kind of con where he's like for tourists to like really hamming up like a Caribbean accent, but actually he's
well, that's what I mean. And
he
suggests that they're off-season stuff, but he's like, it's coming to the end of the season. I've got to up my game to get some chicks, kind of thing. And so you're like, well, so he's been here all this time, like, so is he part of the off-season stuff? What you're saying, Jeffrey Combs, doesn't really align with what we're being given.
Yeah, And like Nancy as well seems like a hardened bartender. Like
Yeah,
he seems like
absolutely.
somebody who's been like tending bar for years now. You know?
It's but it feels like that's what the script needs, so that's what's happening, whether it makes any sense or not. Um, so well, so the next thing I want to mention is because it does kind of so they decide to just kind of hang around this now for some reason deserted holiday resort, and they decide to do karaoke, and it's at this point, coupled with the awful music video that's on the Blu-ray, and the fact that this is now I've heard Jennifer Love Hewitt's song played as background music in the film. She starts singing "I Will Survive," I think,
Yeah, I will survive.
on the karaoke, and it's at this point that I suddenly realise that this isn't a film. This is Jennifer Love Hewitt's singing career showcase. Like 100%, she has insisted that she gets to show off how well she can sing in embroiled into this movie. Like that's what she wants to get out of this.
Yeah. So like, there's this is one of the things about this movie. I think most of the things, it's an enjoyable watch. This movie,
It is.
and most of the things that make it an objectively bad movie are also the things that make it entertaining.
Absolutely.
So like, so, and this is a classic example of that. This scene where she's all blushing and kind of like, oh, I couldn't possibly. So you think the scene is going to go down is like the way she so shyly does it. It's like, she's going to like sing badly or whatever, or she's going to be not into it and just be singing like, I will survive. Like, because she's so traumatized and she doesn't want to like have fun. But no, she goes from like 0 to 100 of like being like, I couldn't possibly, to being like, I'm a diva.
Yeah. Well, but like in terms of body language, everything. Like
Yeah, exactly.
it's painful to watch.
It's an insane turn.
And there's like she wrote a song that's on the DVD that's like I don't even know how to describe the video for it. Like I remember when we watched it last year, me and my wife were howling at this music video, like the angles and stuff they chose for it, and it's supposed to tie into like a slasher movie, and it's abysmal, or in every way.
I've not seen
Um,
this. Maybe I should
it's
watch
on
it.
the Blu-ray. It might be on the DVD as well. I don't know.
Okay.
Um, but and then they play the bloody song. Like when we meet when Freddie Prinze Jr. is on the boat at the beginning. So I was like, this bloody song, I hate it, and it's already happening. And then it's on the end credits as well. So that it feels like they're
Oh,
just
that song.
subjecting me to her singing the whole time.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was actually her song, like on
Mm.
the end credit,
And
that
it's
song.
just not good. But the music video is especially hilarious.
I've got to check out this music video. 'Cause I don't think I've ever seen the music video.
it's
I mean,
just
obviously I've heard the song and
it's
not
like
realizing I heard the song, but
I don't know how to describe it. It's been a while since I watched it, but it's kind of like the cameraman can't like kind of stay still, and he doesn't know how to frame a shot. And it's not good. Um, and I've been directing music videos for a long time, and it like made me like go cross-eyed. It was so horrendously bad. Um, but I mean, maybe part of the reason why her music career didn't really take off. I mean, talking about camera work, this is a thing that I noticed in the film. This is like a filmmaker thing, maybe.
mm,
But so we've got a big lavish production, and it seems quite evident early on to me. I could be wrong here, but that they decided to shoot on anamorphic lenses, which wasn't really a thing for this kind of film back then. Like,
mm-hmm.
They was kind of really safe for like huge productions. Um, So I have a feeling that they decided to shoot on anamorphic lenses. I mean, the film is widescreen, like it looks fancy, and that's the reason why I think. But the other thing that makes me think that is there are a bunch of shots in this that are like mad out of focus. Um, like especially early on, and there's a scene where she's looking in the mirror and she turns around and it pulls focus on her face, but it can't hit it because what I think it is because it's an anamorphic lens, they're really hard to focus close up. So her whole face just isn't in focus, but it's supposed to be. And that
Right, yeah.
happens like a bunch of times, like especially early on in the film. Um, and it just, I don't know whether it's that like they could afford an anamorphic setup, but they, you know, because they had so much money, but they had never used one before. I don't know who the cinematographer was on this, actually. I should look that up. Um, Vernon Layton. So what else has he done? Seed of Chucky. I still know what you did last summer. Um, a bunch of TV movies. So that would suggest to me, like, but I just, from a filmmaking perspective, it's weird. It's it's like the filmmaking is like the filmmaking technically is as competent as the writing almost. Like it brings
Mm-hmm.
it to that level. Um,
Yeah.
but it's weird because the film looks fancy because it's been shot on such a nice setup. But it's so
Yeah, there's a kind of luscious look to the film.
yeah, like it looks expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a bigger Hollywood movie than this kind of film usually would, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a very glossy
yeah.
look to it. Yeah.
To be honest, it's probably the best looking slasher movie of that era, like um in terms of, like lighting and kind of but yeah, some of the camera stuff technically is like a bit bizarre and out of focus and uh but again, it could be because I've also been watching it on Blu-ray the last couple of times. So um, it's maybe stuff you wouldn't notice on a VHS or DVD transfer, but once you put it onto a Blu-ray, it's blaringly obvious that it's they haven't hit focus a bunch of times. So it's at this point that
Mm.
I
I was.
sorry, go on.
All right, sorry. Oh no, I just noticed. I didn't notice that so much because like I'm not a filmmaker myself. I noticed some of the kind of there's some of the kind of clunkiness of some of the filmmaking, some of the just in terms of like what I mentioned earlier
Yeah,
about like the blocking being super obvious and some of the kind of clunky edits and stuff like that. And like I did notice that there was some like weird shot decisions. Like there's a scene early on where she's like I think it's when she's talking to Ray on the phone about winning the competition and like the camera is just like slowly backing away from her in that way that you sometimes see in movies where like a character's had like a trauma or something and
yeah,
then and then it looks like the you know you get more and more distant from the character and you know they become smaller and smaller and it's kind of it's got a kind of symbolic element to it but
yeah,
because it's just like a phone call I mean she's a bit disappointed by Ray's response to the phone call but it just kind of doesn't make sense it's just like why are you doing that? Why are you making that shot decision? Like,
yeah. It's there's a lot of that in this though. I feel like it is a little bit like stuff's there because it looks fancy, but not because it's doing any jobs.
yeah.
If you know
And
what I
I
mean.
guess if you've watched quite a few movies, you associate certain shots with
Yeah,
like a certain meaning, and because like those shots don't have that meaning in this film, it's just like constantly confusing. Of being like because you're constantly searching for the meaning in it, and then you realize, oh no, they just did it because like they thought it looked cool to do that.
yeah. Well, my wife said halfway through, she said there's like a close up of Jack Black getting stabbed, and she goes, "That looks like a shot we would do." where it's obviously just some clothes draped over a cloth, like a pillow or something, being stabbed. And I was like, yep, like, and it kind of goes from like big, kind of fancy, lovely, well composed shots to like really cheap, crappy looking stuff, like kind of backwards and forwards. It's a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Mm.
So at this point in the film, I obviously thought I had it all figured out because I was like, well, Will's the killer, isn't he? Like, I remember this now. Um, I remember that it's a white guy and he's the son of the the fisherman. So at this point, I'm like, Will's the only killer though, because the fisherman died at the end of the first one, right? Like, um, but then the fisherman starts all doing fisherman stuff, but Will's in the jacuzzi with like the others. So I was like, all right. So is it at this point? I'm not sure whether it's just bad writing or whether there's a second killer. Then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and then they introduce all the voodoo stuff with Bill Cobb's character, where he's been because the characters casually mentioned, and like you'd hardly notice it unless like you were sitting making notes and paying attention. And the characters throughout have been going, "Oh, I'm missing my hair bubble. I want to tie my hair up," or "Where's my toothbrush gone?" Maybe that's what Freddie Prinze Jr.'s toothbrush thing was about.
But I mean, like he wasn't there for that. I mean,
Well,
like
I
it was
know, but
Julie's
maybe it was
toothbrush
just the
that
writer
was
going,
missing.
trust me, this toothbrush thing's all gonna come. It's all gonna come together at the end. You just wait. But yeah, he's casting like voodoo stuff um on like their object, like on their possessions and stuff, isn't he? And I guess we're supposed to believe that he's the killer, I guess, or at least
Yeah, I guess
embroiled in it
so.
in
And
some way.
I guess we're only being kind of mildly racist of being like, oh, it's a guy in a Caribbean island. Of course he knows voodoo.
Well, also, when they find all the voodoo stuff in his shack, I was like, why does that look any different to the rest of the shack? Why did you open that cupboard and go, like that? This stuff's lying all over the place. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
guess because there's a toothbrush in there. Oh my god, terrifying. But
That's because they got their stuff, maybe. Yeah, I
yeah, but
like you say, it's not that much different because like, there's like kind of shrunken heads and skulls and stuff like
yeah,
kind of dotted about the whole flat, and they're like la di da, and they're not
like
paying
yeah.
attention
If
to
they'd
that.
opened
But
it and it was like a shrine to Jennifer Love Hewitt, you'd go, okay, like this is problematic, But because it's just
that's
like
true.
more voodoo stuff, you're like, okay. I mean, have you looked around the rest of the room? Like, um, so this brings me to like my main criticism of the film, I think.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the film, Jennifer Love Hewitt has a nightmare. We discussed that in the church at the beginning, big lavish scene where the killer comes to get her and she wakes up screaming in class. And then she comes out of class where we meet her new romantic interest, Will, who they're talking to. And then a bunch of kids throw some firecrackers on the floor, which make her scream, while shouting, Happy 4th of July. So we've now established that it is, like it was last time, the 4th of July uh, when this stuff takes place. So then we have at least one night between between that and the next day when they go to Brazil, because they win the radio show that day, I think. Yeah. Then Freddie Prinze
They do.
Jr. Drives out at night to go and surprise her, and his friend gets killed and he gets put in hospital. And then the next day they go to the island. So surely now it's Happy 5th of July, right?
Well, actually, yeah. No, I'm just trying to think because so like when the firecrackers are thrown to her, so at that point, that's when they say Happy 4th of July, right?
Yeah.
So, like, because, like, then then that night they go to the nightclub.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that same day they go to the nightclub, and then the next morning is when they win the
Oh yeah.
competition. So by the end of the movie, it should be like July 6th or 7th. I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's it's July 4th all the way up to the end. Um, in the last scene, um, they mention it's July 4th, and at that point, I was like, "Oh, what?" But they mention it a bunch of times throughout the film. And when they get to the hotel, they say to Jeffrey Combs, "Oh, hi, we're here to be on the island," and he goes, "Yeah, 4th of July, the storm season rolls in, and everyone just fucks off." And I was like,
See, at that point in the film, it still made sense to me because I was like, because I think Jeffrey Combs says it's 4th of July weekend, or they say it's 4th of July
"Right, okay,
weekend. So it's like, oh, it's like a holiday weekend. But then what doesn't make sense is the end of the movie when she says, "What date is it?" And then Brandy says to her, "July 4th." And
yeah."
you're like, no.
I like, yeah, at this point, it fucking absolutely cannot be. Like, because as well, when they turned the hotel, I thought maybe like it's like a time zone thing, but I feel like that should at least be explained. Like, otherwise they fit a lot into a day and they went to like a morning club and, like, it just baffling. Also, I mean, this is nothing to do with that, but they don't establish that Brandy lives with her. We just kind of have to pick up on that at some point. Because she's like walking around a house with a knife, like, "Who's there?" at the beginning of the film. And then like Brandy's like, "Oh, sorry, I just came to borrow a dress." And you're like, "Right, okay. Why are you in a house?" Like, because
Yeah,
the way she was acting was like someone who lives alone and there's an intruder in her house. But then later we established that they live together. But so why was that weird in the first place?
I don't know. Like, yeah, I honestly don't know because, like, in that kind of scene when she first comes, like, because that scene's ridiculous because like they try and play it for suspense and totally fail. But
Yeah.
the other thing about that scene is, yeah, it seems like Brandy is she's like kicking about and she's like dropped over to get this dress, but also like to kind of drag her out to this nightclub or whatever. But so it's very much played as if Randy lives somewhere else. But when they get the phone call about the competition, it very much seems like they live together, and and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it really doesn't add up at all. Really
Also, like
confusing.
Brandy's like a horrible friend. Like she's like, "Oh yeah, your boyfriend sucks." Like, why? I don't know. Like, because he does. You should go out with this other guy instead. Like, and she's just awful. Like a really bad friend. Um, you know, like that. She gives her like horrible advice, but again, it just feels like it's there to push the plot forward. I can't believe I haven't even mentioned this yet. So, what was Will's plan here? Was he going to? His plan was to get them to go to the island, but did he not think for a second she'd invite her boyfriend? And then was his plan to know that he'd say no and then try and surprise her? Or did he plan just to go and stop him going there anyway? Or like, and then, like, surely if she got a phone call saying, "Oh, hey, your boyfriend nearly got run over and now he's in hospital," or your boyfriend is, if his plan had worked, dead, then surely she'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to cancel this trip to the Bahamas, guys. Someone's killed my boyfriend, Freddie Prince Jr." So I just I can't quite figure out his plan. Like, I mean, it worked out,
I
but you couldn't
so
have
like
planned for that.
yeah, no, I mean he couldn't have planned. There's a lot of things like that in the movie. Like I think the plan as a whole. I mean, even by slasher standard, dude, because like there's some slasher films that have incredibly elaborate plots, but this is the most probably the most ridiculously convoluted plan of any villain in any slasher movie.
Yeah.
I think, because it's even more convoluted, like than something like. Have you ever seen Happy Birthday to Me?
Yes.
So even like Happy Birthday to Me has a ridiculously convoluted plan. The killer has a ridiculously convoluted plan where it tries to convince the final girl that she's the killer, but it turns out that the she is just been like chloroformed throughout the film,
Yeah.
and this is revealed in a very Scooby Doo ending, which is hilarious and really makes that movie. But this even trumps something like that seems off the scale convoluted because there's so many different individual parts of it. Like I take it that Ben, the fisherman, and Will must have come up with this plan together.
Yeah.
And like, so the start of the plan, because like the character Brandy plays says that when like Ray drops out and then Will's in, is like, oh well, Will's like one of my best friends or whatever, you know. So he's been there for a while. So first of all, first step of the plan, they embed Will in the college that Jennifer Love Hewitt's at for at
Yeah.
least a semester. So
Yeah.
he's there for at least a semester doing nothing, just kind of becoming friends with them. And the fisherman is doing nothing for quite some time.
Yeah.
And then they try and rig up a radio competition, which I presume that no matter what answer they gave, they would say it's the right answer.
Why not ask an
Uh,
easier question though?
yeah, I don't know. I'm not
What
sure.
is
I'm
your
not sure why they
name?
don't ask them an easier question. But then the next stage of the thing is that they convince a hotel in off season to stay open, the whole hotel, for only 4 guests.
Yeah.
And then and then what? And then like Will still pretends to be not part of the plan up until the very and then there's other weird bits of the plan as well where it's like so there the doc guy Derek he gets murdered and then just like in the first film like his corpse appears and then disappears so it makes it look like Julie is mad but then like only a couple of scenes later the other corpses start turning up so why do the whole shtick of like let's pretend Julie's mad? You know, like if you're
Yeah.
going to do that, surely you would have done it for longer. Like, and also, like, how did they manage to rig a karaoke machine to say I still know what you do? Like,
Yeah,
there's so
that's
many
how they
individual
work.
parts of this that are like, what is going on?
Ah. And then you've got to factor in, like, it does this thing that I really dislike in horror films, where it goes like, what's reality and what's like spookiness. So there's like a load of bits where like the fisherman just appears all the time, and like she sees him in like the club or like outside of a window or something. Um, but it can't possibly be real, just by the law of physics. Like, like in the nightclub and stuff, where you see him stood in the background and then he's just not there. Like, but there's not enough space for him to have moved. So you go, right. So also like, the film kind of goes like, oh, so it's just spooky and she's just imagining him, but also he is actually real. So like, and a clever film would go, oh yeah, so you thought like, oh, it was all our imagination, but it actually was him all these times, except it can't have fucking possibly been. Like, and it drives me mental.
Yeah, that I think that scene drives me mental in particular because, like you say, there's no. I mean, obviously we've established that somehow he's defeated death. So, like,
Yeah.
okay, so he's some sort of supernatural killer, like Michael Myers, like Jason Voorhees. We're in that territory now. Okay, okay, good. Okay, and we're trying to convince Julie that where the audience is trying to be convinced that Julie's gone a bit mad from trauma, and she's seen him everywhere. Now that's fine, and you can kind of, and even the first time she sees him in the club, it kind of makes sense. You kind of be like, oh well, maybe, in retrospect, maybe he really was there in the club. Maybe she wasn't just imagining him. But then, like you say, the shot when he's in the background and it just kind of flashes and he's there and then he's not there, like that's too, even kind of working on the fact he's a supernatural killer is still because then he would have to be like a ghost, like he would have to have like
Yeah.
different powers, like beyond being just a kind of super natural killer. Because even like Michael or Jason can't do that of just like materialize, dematerialize like that. They can do the kind of fast kind of
Yeah.
walking in the wind thing, like disappear like kind of Batman or whatever, but they can't just like appear, disappear like that.
And if he was the
So the
fisherman,
fact that he's not there
yeah,
makes even less sense because if it's her imagining him, then she can't imagine him behind her.
yeah,
So
and it,
it's like,
yeah,
what is going on?
and if it is him, like if it is actually supposed to be him, the physical him that we realize is still alive at the end of the film, then why, if you've gone to all this effort to set up that plan, would you start fucking standing around in your fucking fisherman outfit, alerting her to the fact that there could be some form of plan?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this
Like, because
ties us
if the
back
plan
to.
if the plan was like, oh, you're not safe here, the fisherman's about, let's go to this island where no one can get to us. That's one thing, but it's presented as like, come on, we need a break. We need a break. We need to go to an isolated place. Um, Now anyone sensible will go, oh, hang on, the last place we need to go is somewhere isolated when there's a fucking fisherman about trying to kill me. Like, so if if he's supposed to be stood around, to spook her up or whatever, he's all he's doing is damaging their extremely convoluted plan.
But then I suppose that's like the Ben Son thing, like
Yeah,
again, where
yeah,
we're tying back to that of like, if you're trying to have this very devious, underhand plan, then why are you also trying supposedly to give clues to the plan at the same time and
yeah.
alert it?
It's
Like,
I mean, what it feels like is from scene to scene, they didn't know what the story was, and it just kind of ends up being like, oh, now it needs to be a deserted island, and now this needs to happen. There are a couple of good bits in it, I think. So I've written
yep.
Brandy smashes the glass ceiling, um, which works in a couple of ways. But yeah, there's a really good scene where she ends up on top of like like an old shack that's kind of got like single glass wooden framed windows on it, and they all start breaking under her feet. Um, Although for some reason she keeps standing directly on the glass panes rather than the support structures, which I have no idea why she does that. But we're in horror movie territory. People have already made a great many bad decisions at this point in this movie. Um, so she falls through that, but she's fine. I think she hurts herself. And she comes to like a door, but it's locked. And it's one of these moments, like you say, that really telegraphs what's coming next. Um, she can't get out of this room, and she's rattling on the door. And Jennifer Love Hewitt and the bar tender turn up and go, "Come on, we gotta, we gotta get you out of here." And the door's locked, and the killer appears, and he's coming up on her, and she goes, "We've got to unlock the door," and they're trying all the keys, and it's none of them are working. So she grabs an axe and she smashes the window out. Brandy climbs through it at the last second before the hook catches her shoe, but doesn't quite kill her. Do you know the bit I'm talking about? I mean, I've
Yep.
described it quite well. So at that point, the fisherman is hanging through the window where he's just trying to claw Brandy's leg. Jennifer Love Hewitt standing with an axe. Perfect opportunity to axe him in the head. And she goes, "Okay, let's run. Let's run away then." But that sequence up to that point, I thought was really good. Quite tense.
I think it is quite suspenseful that sequence because you get them. They're being chased. The three of them go up into the an attic, and then he bursts through the top into the attic. They're chasing into the attic, and then she falls down, and then she falls through this kind of big conservatory type thing.
Yeah,
And that and then there is even though it's heavily telegraphed what's happening and it's like, oh, the killer's behind you kind of thing, and the race to get the right key and stuff like that, it still works. Even though that's one of the scenes that, despite its telegraphing, it still works. The
yeah.
suspense still
That's
works
like a
in that
good
scene.
sequence where you kind of separate the characters off, and then it's like they're separated by a locked door, and there's a lot of tension in that, and I thought that was really well done. Apart from then, like I say, she had the perfect opportunity to hit him in the head with an axe, and she was like, "Nah, nah, I won't bother." Um, which seemed silly, but there is another good bit where they're scrabbling around in the dark. It's just after that, and she says, "Hold on to my hand," and Brandy says, "I am holding your hand." And I thought, "Oh my god, excellent!" And they turn on the light, and she's holding the hand of the laundry lady,
Yeah,
and I
I
just
think
thought,
that's.
"Oh, that was good. That works." You know what I mean? I thought, like, you know, that was well done. I thought, it was a good moment. I liked it. Um,
Again, I mean, there, there, there is that kind of. I think it's an entertaining moment. There is the kind of slight kind of illogicalness of that moment as well. Of but it is still entertaining that um the group have basically found the various deceased employees in different places, and they've been put on display
yeah,
so that
which is like a
the
slasher trope that I really like.
yeah, yeah,
You
no,
know,
it's a fun thing. So they've been put on display kind of throughout the resort. The cleaning ladies found in a laundry dryer. Mr. Brooks, the hotel manager, played by Jeffrey Combs, is found with a big machete stuck in his head, and "I still know" written on blood behind him on the wall, and stuff like that. So the thing that really entertained me about this scene where she's holding the hand of the cleaning lady is the corpses have been dotted about, put on display for to be discovered, and then the killer thought, you know what would be real fun is if we gather them all together and then put them in display all together to be
yeah,
discovered so we can be found again.
yeah. Let's get as much use out of these things as we can. You know. Um. So, well, I think one of the downfalls of this film really is that the kills are fucking boring as fuck. Really boring. They're almost all either an extreme close up of something stabbing something, or a cut to black. Almost all of them. And that's a real shame, I think. Um, there's a couple that none of them spring to mind in terms of gore, though, apart from, I guess, Mackay Pfeiffer gets lifted up by a hook. Um, but it's really CGI, and it looks pretty bad.
Do you think that was a kind of they were given a mandate for a certain certificate and
Perhaps,
then
yeah. Is it a 15?
I'm
Um,
not I'm not sure that I'm not sure. It may possibly is a 15, but I do there's various moments in the movie that like it feels like the movie wants to be A, gorier, and B,
Yeah.
sleazier. Like it feels like it wants to show more gore, and it feels like it wants to show more nudity as
Oh my
well.
God.
But it's
Yeah.
like
Like
somebody has been like, you've got this certificate,
yeah.
um, because in terms of the latter, like I do feel like there is a kind of perviness to this film, but it's like somebody's been like, oh, you can be this amount of pervy, but
Yeah.
no further. Because there is a particularly ridiculous shot just before Jennifer Love Hewitt goes into the sun lounger, where we close up on her breasts and then scan down to her feet and then watch her go like
Yeah.
really slowly
She takes off.
scan down her whole
She
body
yeah.
to her feet, and then she goes in the sun lounger. It's like, yeah, that shot doesn't need to be there, but
Yeah. She
obviously,
takes off like her pants and like bra, and she's
uh-huh.
got like a smaller pants and bra underneath. Like it's just, it's baffling. My wife said like whoever made this obviously is just perving on Jennifer Love Hewitt this entire film. Like every scene she's in is like a top that shows off like her breasts or like, but not bare, but just enough. Like everything's chosen to be like like oh look at her boobs kind of thing. Like or or oh look at her bare legs. Like at night she's walking around in just like a shirt or whatever, and like um it's
There is a yeah, there is a kind of leering aspect to this movie when it comes to
yeah,
Jennifer Love Hewitt. I mean, like because they're in this cyclone, so there's like a lot of rain. So it's like, what's the best uniform to deal with this rain? Can you wear like a black bra and then like a white shirt?
yeah.
That's
Although
that's
half
what
the
that's what
time
we
it's
want.
just like, can you just wear a white shirt, please? And we'll make sure that the nipple bits are as see through as they can be without seeing through them. Like, you know, um, I also like the rain, how heavy the rain is, so much so that because obviously to show up on camera, rain has to be way heavier than it is in real life.
Yeah.
Um, but in this, it's so over the top that you can literally see the actors like drowning through their lines, um, especially at the dock. Like, it's hilarious. Them trying to like act while spitting water out of their mouths almost. Um,
Oh, that scene's real fun. Like when she's given the kind of like true backstory of what happened, and Brandy's this is new information to Brandy of like, oh no, it wasn't there. Just we run over the guy, but like he came back and he killed the friends, and then and the way she's kind of shouting and spitting and flailing her arms, it's amazing.
yeah, big arm acting. That's what we need from JLH. Um, so
to
yeah,
to go back to your original thing though, the about the kills, like yeah, the kills are pretty lame for the most part.
yeah,
Although I do think the funniest kill, just and it's not like a good kill, but I think just because the way it's set up, it's really funny. Is Jack Black's character,
yeah,
who is an awful irritant. Like Jack Black, of the cameos, Jack Black is the worst. Um, and so obviously he's got his hook, and he stabs his hook into his hand. And Jack Black, because he's like does maybe gardening or something. Like there's just this line of weapons of like an axe and like garden shears
yeah,
and like a bunch of other stuff. And like Ben kind of like caresses like various kind of options of like, oh, can I take this axe? Oh, can I take this thing? Oh no, I'll take the garden shears, and then just plunges it into his chest. I just laughed out loud at that kill.
yeah. But again, it's like a close up. It could have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My wife said that's like this kind of stuff we shoot in our living room after a shoot. Like close ups of things being stabbed and that because we didn't have time to do it on set. She said it looks like that, which I thought was quite funny. She said, "Do you think they filmed that in their living room or they in their kitchen? You know, trying to match the floors up." Um, So I thought it was quite funny. But yeah, so they revealed there's two killers at the end, and that Will is Will Benson, as in Will Ben's son, son of Ben Willis, the the killer from the first one, who is very much still alive, which was a surprise to me. Um, Although he seems to be a fucking cartoon character version of the one from the first one. Like he's like, aha, yes, I'm evil and I've drawn you here. Like, I feel like there was some nuance to him the first time round. But that's all gone. Um, they so they have some like history on this island. Like that's a weird part of the movie that doesn't really seem to go anywhere. Um, like his mother and sister are buried there or something.
Um,
And then there's a grave dug for Jennifer Love Hewitt.
there is a grave down for Denver. I wasn't quite sure. Like, so, like, yeah. So Estes mentions that Ben worked on the island.
Right.
When he does the Brasilia reveal, like, he
Right.
was like, oh, Ben, like he worked here for many years, and you're like, he did. Um, okay. Uh, And then he tells a story about like the room 201 and 202. And I thought that that was like Ben had like killed his wife or something. Like because he had a wife and a daughter and son, and
Yeah.
presumably Will's the son. I don't know what happened to the daughter, but like yeah, there's like two graves. I don't know if he killed his daughter as well. Like that's not explained. It's just like it seemed like he killed his wife, and then
Yeah.
it was never heard of what happened to the son or daughter. But it's not like Estes doesn't explain the theories of like why he went mad or killed her. Oh
Well,
no, like apparently
the
she was
third
cheating.
grave
She was
is
cheating.
originally his, though, isn't it? And then they dig it up and write her name on the grave.
Yeah.
And that's why I was confused. I was like, so did they bring him out here and bury him after the first movie? And then climbed out of he climbed out of the grave. Is that is that what they're suggesting? Like,
I mean, maybe it's like a kind of Friday the 13th Part 6 sort of situation where,
yeah, I
like,
mean, it seems to be there so
someday,
they
like,
can
there was
push him into it at
lightning
the end.
conducted and he came back from the dead.
It seems to be there because it needs to be so that he can get knocked into this grave at the end of the film. um, that seems to be the reason for it. Um, and they try to explain it away with a little bit of backstory. Um, I am pleased Brandy survives at the end because
Yeah, I think she was.
usually
Yeah.
you um, you get your final girl and usually their love interest surviving at the end. So um, it was quite well done. Um, I thought it was a nice surprise. Although, who alerted the Coast Guard?
This I don't know because, like, I mean, maybe the guy whose boat was stolen. I honestly
But
am
then
not sure about this at all because apparently the
something
radio is
like
broken.
help is on the way. To collect to collect survivors or whatever. How do they know what happened? Like for
Because the
all they
movie says so.
I get, yeah, like it's a bit baffling. Like I can't remember how they put it now, but they're like, help is on the way. Help is on the way to collect survivors or whatever. And I was like, okay, like that's weird. Um, so the last bit obviously is the teaser for the next film that we never got, which is
Yeah.
where the
Can I just mention briefly
can
that the fact that the movie at the beginning of the movie they lean so heavily on the kind of like trauma thing of like, oh my god, it's so traumatic, surviving one of these events, and then at the end of the movie Brandy, whose boyfriend has been brutally murdered and like has been chased around just as much as Jennifer Love Hewitt has, is like fine. She's fine when she
Yeah,
survives and it's all over. She's fine, and she's making quips about like, oh, just don't tell anybody it rained all the time.
yeah,
And
like
that's the last thing we hear her character say.
yeah, it's like the cursed like, oh, my boyfriend was a werewolf. This will make me sad for 15 seconds, but the plot must move on. Like it's very much in like that. Um, but I like the last scene. I always think it's really well, except for the weird toothbrush stuff. Even then,
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what
like,
that's about.
but
Like,
that shot of him
you
under
know,
the bed, I really like. Like I don't know what it is about it. It's to be honest, it's the only thing I remembered about the film when I sat down to watch it again, apart from the fact that Jack Black was in it. Was I remember that shot? Although I always remember it as being the son, like the young man, and it wasn't. It was the fisherman. But I thought it was really well put together, that last shot for this kind of thing. Um, and then it goes into the end credits where they play Jennifer Love Hewitt's song again.
yeah.
It's fucking terrible. What's it called? I'll have a look because it's got a really annoying, stupid name, and I can't remember. I can't see it on the on IMDb. Just here we go. How do I deal? It's called.
Okay.
It's awful, really awful, really awful. And the music video is even worse. So the one last thing I wanted to talk about this film is something really weird, and this is taken. So I watched this at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's about 100 minutes. So my time in between then and now has been trying to find out this really weird thing. So I was watching the end credits, and I was like, "Oh, it'd be interesting to see where Jack Black's billed on the credits," because I can't remember how famous he was in like 1997 or whatever, 1998.
98. Not that famous, I guess.
So I was like, I wonder where he's billed on this then. So the credits kept going, and then the actors stopped, and I was like, oh, I must have missed him. So I went back, I read it again. Where is he? So I went back and read it again. Where's Jack Black on the credits? And I was like, I mean, he's definitely in the film. I've just watched it. He's in it, you know. Um, so I went to IMDb and it said Jack Black uncredited, and I was like, what's going on here? Why is he not credited? Every other actor in the film, apart from like, like the girl in the bikini and stuff like that, is credited. So the characters that are uncredited are like cocktail waitress, classmate, club goer, basketball player, and Titus Telesco, i.e. Jack Black, uncredited. And I've spent 2 hours today trying to find out why Jack Black is not credited on this film. And I can't find a thing.
That's very curious. I didn't realize that. I didn't read the full credits.
I wouldn't have even noticed had I not just been like, oh yeah, Jack Black, I wonder where he's the closest thing I can find is that someone said that he had it removed out of embarrassment, which makes sense. But that's just speculation on a forum. Like I can't find any concrete reason why he's not credited on the film. But that's the biggest trivia of them. It's not even in the trivia on IMDb.
That's very curious.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that.
And I can't figure out why.
Yeah, because you like characters who have that. I mean, like it's a decent sized cameo. He's got at least.
Well, he's got more scenes than almost any of the other island staff members.
Yeah, cause he turns up at the beginning when they first arrive and
Yeah.
like offers to get them weed. Then he turned and he has a little conversation with Derek. I wasn't quite sure if that character's name was Derek or Derek. People keep saying it in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, so he turns up in a scene there, so that's two scenes. Then he turns up in the Jacuzzi 3, and then his death scene. So four. So he has at least four scenes. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's got like 4 or 5 scenes in it compared to like most of the like Jeffrey Combs has two. Estes has probably about the same as Jack Black, but I mean he seems to be much more of a main character. But yeah, Jack Black out of all those people has what I would say, and he's the most memorable thing about the film. Um, but I don't know why he's not credited on it. I'm guessing he didn't want to be. He thought it would harm his career.
I,
Um,
I guess so. Like,
I mean,
I suppose it's like kind of maybe thought it was kind of an embarrassing. I mean, it is kind of an embarrassing
yeah,
character.
yeah. Like, what were they thinking?
I
It's
honestly
just,
don't know.
it's. I mean, it's funny, but I feel like it's not meant to be. But I don't know. He is played as a stupid character. So, the other thing I like is that I said to my wife, you know, when he pops out the water and he's got like a joint in his hand, and I
Hmm.
said, so did he just swim over here underwater, but with his hands sticking out the water, like to keep that joint dry? And then he lights it and he starts swimming away, but he keeps dipping this joint in the water. And I was like, well, that's ruined now, isn't it? Like, he can't smoke that. But it's just
Just one of the many, many logical flaws in
baffling,
this movie.
baffling. Um,
Do you know what you know, just something that you made me think of just when you were talking about the ending was that you thought it was like Will in the bed under the bed
yeah,
who grabs Jennifer Love Hewitt and drags her under, and like you say, I think it is like it's a good moment. It doesn't make sense, but it's a good moment,
yeah,
and it's a good way, you know, it's a good kind of button to end the movie on. However, just because of your confusion there about it being Will and it actually being Ben the fisherman, and I was just thinking, oh, I wonder, does that mean that like genetically you can't inherit like supernaturalness? Like you're like that's you can't pass it down to your offspring. Like, because, like, you know, because we've now established that basically the fisherman's a supernatural killer,
yeah.
but
I guess, yeah.
it seems like Will is like dead, so like you can't pass that on to your offspring, like being
Which is a
a
shame
supernatural
because
being.
I mean, I could have done with. I still know what you did last summer. The Revenge of Ben's Son, um, written in capitals so that we get it. Capital bold italics, so we get it. The Revenge of Ben's Son, um, would have been, uh, you know, I would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have the series to go out on like a high budget third note, to be honest. But can't have
That
everything
would
you
be
want
fun.
or
No,
anything you
you
want.
can't have everything you want. I mean, I think they should have, if they did that, if they had done that, you know, I still know, um, the Revenge of Ben's Son, which I think is a really good title.
Oh yeah,
And like you say,
took a
I
little
think you're
long.
like a capital bold italics, like written in red kind of thing. The Ben's Son part. I think they should have really leaned into like how convoluted can we make this plan? I mean,
Yeah,
the plan in this movie is the most elaborate nonsense probably ever put on screen.
yeah.
So like just really lean into just being like we're going to make this even more elaborate, you know. I don't know how they push that,
Yeah.
you know, but you know, I'm sure they can come up with something.
Well, I mean, the straight to video sequel is probably worth like a one-time watch. I mean, I've watched
Right.
it twice for some stupid reason. Because you know, when you're watching a film series, you sometimes want to just make sure you've watched them all. you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so it's worth a watch, but it doesn't continue any of this, which is which is a crying shame, really. Because I would have liked to see where they took these characters and stuff. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think overall it's a fairly forgettable film, and I've watched it a few times, and I can never remember anything about it. Like today, like I say, I've had to write notes and talk about it in real great depth to really remember anything that happens in it. Um, and it's just I don't know. It feels a little bit like a film that was kind of made as they went along.
It does. I mean, like I didn't. I've seen it a few times as well, and I didn't really remember it that well. But the things that always stick in my mind are the Jack Black character,
Yeah,
because he's terrible. Um, the the ending, like you said, and just like the schematics of the plot. Like I always remember the thing about the Rio Brasilia
yeah,
thing, like the radio competition thing, and like just the ludicrousness of it, of the way it's set up. So there's something then that always sticks out in my mind. But like in terms of like the things you tend to remember slashers for, like which is mainly the kills and sometimes kind of
yeah,
my and sometimes kind of the one-liners and stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of that, like no, I didn't remember like any of the kills because like rewatching it, like you say, kills are pretty lame. And yeah, although I suppose in some ways I should mention this before we kind of wrap up, that in some ways this movie did play a part in my horror fandom, because when I was growing up as a kid, I wasn't a massive horror fan, even though I took in a lot of kind of horror adjacent content or horror for kids, like the kind of Tales from the Crypt cartoon, or like things like Buffy that were kind of horror
yeah,
adjacent, whatever. I enjoyed stuff like that. But so I didn't really become a horror fan until like my teens, and like a big turning point for me is around 1999, where like during the kind of that summer, me and my friends like rented like a bunch of movies, um, like the first two Screams, with this movie and the original I Know What You Did Last Summer and The Faculty, and then that kind of became the springboard for like me becoming like a horror fan and like
yeah,
seeking out more horrors from that point. So like it isn't a kind of group of films that is like my kind of main introduction to horror movies. So
yeah.
I guess it has a place in my heart because of that. But it is a terrible film.
Oh yeah, like the trouble is that because it's so forgettable, you go, I still know what you did last summer. I it can't be as bad as I think it was, or people say it is. Surely it can't be. Like, because the pieces in your mind all work together so well. So, you know, the survivor of the massacre goes to like a holiday resort to try and forget her troubles, but the killer follows her there, like and you go, like, that's a fucking good setup for a movie. Like, you know, how can this
Yeah.
possibly not work? But the trouble is, I don't know if it doesn't not work. It does. It does work in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it also doesn't really think about what it's doing. So it kind of it bogs itself down in like trying to justify things that don't need to be justified and not concentrating on the logic of the situation um and so like I think if they'd just gone, let's go to this island for a holiday, it's a killer here, bollocks, you know, and made the kills a bit more elaborate. I think this, I think one we would have got a third movie, and I think this would have been remembered as, you know, a a semi decent follow up to a
Yeah.
classic slasher. But as it is, it seems to be remembered as one of the worst. And I think it was definitely one of the most expensive slasher movies made at the time,
Yeah.
if not the most. Um, I'll leave you on this note. that
Okay.
due to the negative critical reaction to the film upon its release, Freddie Prinze Jr. admits that he has never seen the film. That says it all.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, he really doesn't seem like he wanted to be there. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Which
I
is a
think
shame.
if Freddie Prince is listening to this, which he's not, I think he should watch it. I think just
Yeah, I think you'd get a lot out of it. What I'd like is to cut out all his bits and just edit it into like a 7-minute short film. The Freddie
just Ray's
Prinze
story.
Chronicles.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right, well, I think that's it.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for joining me. This has been a blast. I don't know how long we've been talking for, probably about 2 hours. So this might be our longest one yet. But thank you for joining me, Scott. It's been great to have you.
That seems to happen so often when we start talking. I'm
It
sure
does.
this
It's the
is probably
tangents issue, I think.
I even tried to reel in my natural tangents. We didn't go off script in terms. We still mainly talked about the movie.
We went into a brief history of the Scream killers, I suppose.
I suppose that is true. I suppose that's a fair point.
But yeah, thank you for joining me. It's been great to have you. So thank you for listening. If you like this, you can get these early on our Patreon at patreon.com/Myco, MYCHO. Otherwise, they go up on anchor.fm/Myco, MYCHO, about every month, about halfway through every month. I think if you haven't listened already, we've done Scream 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and our latest one before this was Exorcist 3/Legion. So they've all been, relatively, I would say, popular sequels so far. So we may go into some more obscure ones. But yeah, any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to check out our movies and comics and video games and stuff, you can go to myco.co.uk, mycho.co.uk. We've got other podcasts and interviews and all sorts of other stuff there as well. So thank you for joining me, Scott. And until next time, just remember, it's only a sequel. It's only a sequel. It's only a sequel. It's only a sequel. It's only a sequel.